Hey, everybody. Get this little guy up here a little bit. There we go. Hey, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to the first Bourbon Talk of 2022. We're going to do a lot tonight. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of things to get to. It's really good to see everybody. I had to take the last one off because I was working on the book, and I'm facing a pressing deadline. I got the book, which is due on January 24th, and I'm going to make it. Shockingly enough, I'm going to make it, which is good. I got a little bit of work left to do. I'm working around the clock. It has been pretty intense, but I'm going to make it. And I was excited to get back to this. I missed everybody a couple of weeks ago. We have so much to get over, and let's take that down like one. For starters, we're going to open for a new year. We're going to open a new bottle of bourbon that I got over the holidays. It's called Old Williamsburg. I have no idea if it's any good, but like most bourbons that you haven't heard of before, you just kind of choose what's happening with the label. It's a nice little label. I hope everybody had a good holiday. I hope everybody is having a good new year, finding some good ground to start the year off, finding some purpose and joy in the midst of everything. It's been a lot. I had family stuff, family health issues dealing with, but knock on wood, things are looking a little bit better. We got a lot to talk about tonight, but I wanted to start by sort of beginning this year by getting off on the right foot, by getting us all on the same page. These talks keep getting more and more viewers. I want to make sure that people understand where we're coming from, what we're talking about. And on top of that, I want to also talk about what we can do. And I am making it my personal mission to get more into the fight this year. And not just to diagnose the problems, which I feel like I feel like working on this book and working on the last few books and doing the work that I've been doing with the podcast and the Substack and all of that stuff. I feel like I have a really good grip on where we are. I feel like I have a good grip on where we have been. Of course, for those who don't know, I started the new book with the Roman Empire and the collapse of the Roman Empire and how Christianity and Western civilization came together and formed the basis of where we are now. I've worked my way through history. I'm currently I'm at 2005, I believe. Not fun reliving the Bush era once more after having to do it the first time in real time and then having to do it again for American rule. But I do feel like a lot of things are becoming clearer and clearer as I go. So I want to talk first and foremost about what's going on. I want to define it as clearly and as straightforward as we possibly can. That way people who find this video, who find my work, they'll know what foot we are jumping off of. We're not talking about conspiracy theories. We're not talking about hair on fire type shit. We're talking about what has actually happened in our history, what has actually happened in our politics, what has actually happened culturally and socially, the ideas that are at play here. I want to go ahead and get on the right foot, because again, we're getting more and more people who are watching these things, picking up on this stuff. We have classes that are watching this at this point. We have groups of people who are watching this. I'm getting emails from family members who have been turned on to this thing and want to ask questions. So I want to get off. In 2022, I want to get off on the right foot, make sure that we're all on the same page. And then I want to talk about what I think we can do and where I think we should go. And New Year's, of course, this time of year is a time for new beginnings. It's a time for resolutions. It's a time for putting our energy towards things. And I want to talk about what I think is the answer, what I think will be the answer, because I think that we're going to beat this thing. And I do think that we are going to create something realer and more human and more decent. But we need to talk about how to do that. And these talks and the podcast and my writing are going to be peppered with more of that stuff, because I don't know about the rest of you. I'm tired of this bullshit. I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of watching people suffer. And I'm tired of watching this stuff just grow and grow and grow. So before we begin, and before I answer questions and all that good stuff, cheers. Here is to us. We made it through another year. Things are really, really hard, but we've kept our heads, we have kept our faith, we have kept our energy, we have kept our decency. I'm very tired of it too. We're going to beat this thing. We're going to be victorious. Cheers. That's good. That's good bourbon. It's a good bourbon. All right. So very, very quickly, before we begin, I want to be very clear about what is happening, where we're going, and what what we might be facing. The current moment that we are in is dominated by a political philosophy called neoliberalism. For those who don't already know this, neoliberalism sounds like liberalism, which of course is what people think leftists are, right? Or what Democrats are. And some Democrats are neoliberals. Also, some Republicans are neoliberals. The political ideology of neoliberalism is the idea that ideology, and by the way, we're inside because it is storming like hell out there. I was outside, I was ready to be out on the porch. It is now storming like hell. So you probably hear that in the background. Neoliberalism is the belief that freedom and liberty only exists through the freedom of the market, capitalism. It is the idea that ideology and democracy are dangerous, right? This was formulated post-World War II, or actually right before World War II, through, and then eventually took off post-World War II by people like Friedrich Hayek, right? Or Milton Friedman. Eventually it coalesced into what people are more familiar with, which is Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, those types of things. Reagan, Thatcher, these were people who pushed this idea. It was not their idea. They didn't come up with it. They weren't inspired to create it. They were pushed by economists and think tanks and experts who basically believed that a group of technocrats, that is experts, should be the ones who run government. That me and you and everyone that we know, we're not smart enough to do it. So why should our votes really count? If we go out and we vote different every 4 years, that will mess up the capitalist project. All we would do is interrupt the capitalist project, right? Because if we are able to vote and we are able to change things, that would really screw up things for other people, particularly people with a lot of money and property and power. That could trouble them, right? So what neoliberalism did, is it went into all of these places. It starts in a place called Chile, right? We have an authoritarian coup. Of course, we have Pinochet, who comes in and just sort of runs things, crushes labor unions, crushes the left, all of those people, and basically just allows these free market people to run roughshod. And they love authoritarianism, love it. They love it way more than they like democracy. In fact, they say that authoritarianism is actually more representative and more protective of human liberty than democracy. Because in a democracy, of course, if you don't agree with stuff and it's being voted for, then that is tyranny on you. They would much rather take politics out of this whole thing. So what does it do? It captures, right? It captures government. And basically, in a government of neoliberals, which is essentially what we have right now, they're not going to give you money because they don't believe in investing in human projects. They're not going to give you healthcare. They're not going to fund your education because they don't believe in the government doing those types of things. They believe that the market should take care of those things, that corporations and privatization should take care of those things. So we don't need healthcare, we don't need infrastructure, we don't need housing, we don't need food. Matter of fact, we don't even really need to go into places like, New Orleans after Katrina. We don't need to go into Texas when people are freezing to death during a winter, when that capitalist market fails, right? Because they don't want that. Because for the government to invest money in human projects, it means ideology. What they want us to do is they only want us to vote using our money. That means that we as consumers are sovereign. That means that our vote is pretty much worthless. But if we buy things, we show what we prefer. And so as a result, what happened because of neoliberalism? What happens is that we feel more and more like we do not have power. That is by design. We are supposed to feel powerless. We are supposed to feel like the only thing that we can do is go out and buy things. And yeah, we get a lot of nice things. Like I'm sitting here in my nice chair in my nice office, drinking my nice bourbon. I've got nice things in the background. Why aren't I happy? Shut up and be happy with your bourgeois American middle class lifestyle, right? But the problem is that even though neoliberalism attempted to get rid of ideology, all it did was move ideology around. It allowed space for neo-fascism, authoritarianism, white supremacy, neo-fascism, neo-Nazism, you name it. It gave it room to grow because as we felt like we didn't have power, well, then what ended up happening? You want power. And there's room for people to say, hey, you know what? If you put on a nifty armband and you start doing the Roman salute and you start falling in line with white supremacy, if you start, believing that might makes right, you have power. Because the absence of power or the absence of all those things breeds discontent. And there's only a couple places that can go. It can go into revolution. It can go into authoritarianism, fascism. And I have to tell you, these people really enjoy authoritarianism and they really enjoy fascism. Why? Because it protects them. They're not ethical. They don't actually have an ideology beyond protecting their own property and their own wealth and their own power. So what we have right now is a situation where that neoliberal project has been pushed and pushed and pushed so much that we have become alienated. Our wages have stagnated, and we feel like we're being oppressed by the system because it is an inherently white supremacist, patriarchal, and evangelical system. It enforces itself on us. And if we speak out against it, we're thrown out of the market. We're no longer viable within the market. So what are we talking about here? We are talking about this strange place that we're in, where politics doesn't make sense because politics has been depowered. The only people who are able to sort of gain a populist advantage are people like Donald Trump, who don't even mean what they're saying. He never intended to drain the swamp. He never intended to build the wall. The only thing that Donald Trump wanted to do was further privatize the country. It was to bring in people like Betsy DeVos to destroy public education. It was bringing people in to destroy the Environmental Protection Agency. They were brought in to further the project of neoliberalism while saying they were against neoliberalism. So we have reached a point in our politics where the only thing that our politicians can promise, it's not a better life. It's not even better living conditions. It's, you know what, if you put us in power, we're going to make life hell for your enemies. This is why we're in a culture war. It's the only place in which people feel like they have political power anymore. Now, most of you have probably come across me, whether you are a regular viewer or whether you are a first-time Bourbon Talk viewer, which, by the way, cheers. You've probably come across me because of my Twitter platform, because back in 2016, of course, I was sneaking into Trump rallies, and ever since then, I've been trying to document this stuff and figure out exactly what has happened, right? Twitter makes us feel like we're doing something by retweeting things, by liking things, by keeping up on things. In a way, that can work. But it is a privatized, corporatized space. It's a second screen. It's like watching American Idol, only it's, Pelosi and Cruz and Rubio, right? And Schumer. All of a sudden, you're tweeting for those people. All of a sudden, they become your avatars. If they win, you win. That's what ends up happening. And it sort of takes out, well, not sort of, it takes the democracy out of the democracy, which is what corporations and the wealthy and these technocratic elites want. They want us to continue commenting on this, but never actually upsetting the boat. Politics is exactly like professional wrestling now. Now, everything that I'm saying does not mean that the Republican Party is not a dangerous neo-fascistic white supremacist movement, because it absolutely is. That's what they represent. But I will tell you that economically, there is a neoliberal consensus within our government and within our parties. This is why someone like a Joe Manchin can't possibly get on board with anything that's going to help people out of poverty or anything that's going to make your lives even a little bit better, because he is a neoliberal. Because neoliberals do not believe that the government should do that. They hide behind saying things like they don't want to raise the budget, they don't want inflation. All of that is bullshit and made up. It's about not giving away any money that is theirs that is being redistributed to the wealthy and the already powerful. All right, that is the crash course, and we're going to be getting more into this tonight. We're going to be taking questions about this. But before we begin, I want to go ahead and I want to state very, very specifically what I think we can do and what we must do. I think we still need to vote against the Republican Party. I want to be very clear about that. I do not think that the Democrats have necessarily earned your vote, but I do think that it is necessary not to vote for the Republican Party. They are a dangerous authoritarian movement, and every single day they become more and more radicalized, both because for some of them, it is their ideology. They do believe in white supremacy. They do believe in patriarchal, theocratic regimes that can, rule your life, take away your right to choose, and basically, work you to death. But they are also grifters. They're also trying to play all this up. There is a line between the people who truly believe this and the people who are just play acting. The problem is that those two groups very often go together. A lot of the MAGA people, a lot of the Trump people, they're pretending to be fascist, but that kind of makes you a fascist already. It goes ahead and hurries you along and escalates you joining a fascist authoritarian movement. The question is, when are they going to go ahead and join? Somebody asked about the stack of books. This right now is the stack of books from the last chapter of the current book that I'm writing. I need to go and get the next chapter's books. So yes, we need to vote against the Republican Party because that is who they actually are. They are an authoritarian fascistic movement. That is true. But I need to tell you something, and that is just voting for the Democratic Party is not going to make this thing better. They are riddled through with neoliberals. One of the things that has happened here is that you have a Democratic Party that in the late 1980s, early 1990s, decided that neoliberalism was literally the only way to go and that they needed to embrace these things. The Democratic Party before that built its base on labor unions, poor people, people of color, people who needed to have some sort of representation. They decided there wasn't much there. They needed money from corporations. They needed money from business people. They needed to go ahead and court a lot of the same people who were supporting the Republican Party. That has been the case since the late 1980s, early 1990s with the Democratic Party. If you want to save the Democratic Party, and I understand people who want to go that route, as opposed to starting an independent party and other than creating something else. I understand all of that. If you want to save the Democratic Party has to be changed. The Democratic Party has to come out of its neoliberal stupor. Joe Biden, of course, hat tip to this. The idea was that the government was going to start investing in human projects again. It was going to do the Build Back Better agenda, of course, right? In the past, for those of you who are asking, where's the military-industrial complex and all of this? That's where the money was going. That was the jobs program, was constant war. It was going into other countries and running them out and enslaving people of color and poor populations around the world so that they could fit into this neoliberal machine. In this case, there was a hat tip by the Democratic Party. They didn't jump totally in there, as we can see by the fact that Joe Manchin has become the de facto leader of the Democratic Party in these times. But the Democratic Party, in order to stave off these problems, has to change in so many damn ways. Now, I can't imagine. We might have a couple of Democratic operatives. We might even have some representatives from the Democratic Party. I've been hearing more and more from them lately. So hat tip to you. You have a big job ahead of you. If you're listening, you need to change the party. And from the people that I talk to, you know that you need to change the party. The people in the progressive wing that I talk to know that there has to be a change within the Democratic Party in order for it to meet this current crisis. If you are not a Democratic operative, if you are not a politician, if you are not a wealthy person, an affluential person, if you are a run-of-the-mill American person, one of the things that you are going to say, what can I do? With this information, what can I do? And I totally understand that, because I wish I could snap. That was a terrible snap. I wish I could snap my finger and make it different. I wish like hell that I could do that. I can't. You can't either. By wanting it, it doesn't make it happen. What needs to happen with us is that we need to reject the idea that we are powerless. We need to reject the neoliberal idea that this system is bigger than us and more powerful than us, and we can never possibly change it. Because the only way that this works is by spending a lot of money, spending a lot of political capital, and spending a lot of power, time, and effort making you believe that nothing could possibly ever change, so why would you even try? The one thing that you can do is just retreat and just sort of accept it. I'm telling you right now, in 2022, I am begging you, reject that shit. That doesn't mean that you have to run for office. If you feel like you need to run for office, absolutely run for office. My God, you would be so much better than most of the people who are in office right now. The problem is that big money and big donors and special interest own the government at this point. It costs so much to run for office at this point. Most of the job is raising the money to run for office. Most of the people are already independently wealthy or are jacked into those donor connections to go ahead and do it. So if you have a chance to run for office, why not do it? You don't have to run to be president, senator, congressperson. You can run locally. You can run to be a representative. You can run for your school board. All of those things are incredibly important at this point. And we have been told it's not worth your time to be involved with these things. Meanwhile, neoliberals, wealthy, powerful, malevolent forces have gone ahead and taken control of those offices that we should be running for or that we should be taking. On top of that, you can reach out to nonprofits. You can reach out to organizations. All you have to do is find something that you care about, something that you're passionate about. Reach out to them and say, hey, I know that you are swamped. I know that you don't have a budget. I know that you are overwhelmed and outgunned. What can I do? I'll stuff envelopes. I'll send emails. I'll enter some data. And I know that you are working so hard. 15 minutes, 30 minutes a week will make a difference. What we're actually talking about here, it isn't necessarily the task that you are part of. What we are talking about is a reawakening of the spirit of actual governance. It's a reawakening of the fact that we do have power. There are way more of us than there are of them. And the problem is that we have been convinced that there's nothing that we can do. There's nothing that we could possibly ever do. Look, there's so much money, there's so much power. How could we ever possibly work against it? The only way that we're going to fix this thing, and we've seen it throughout history, but it's playing out again here, is a reawakening of some sort of a populist movement. It's some sort of an anti-corruption, anti-big money, anti-money in politics, an anti-neoliberal movement. Something has to gain ground. We do that via solidarity. You are kept from talking to other people. You are kept from discussing what's going on in your lives. You are kept from your fellow workers. You are kept from engaging in labor unions or collective action. You can do those things, but it starts by forming relationships and forming trust. That's how you get elected. That's how you take power. That's how you make change. Neoliberalism chops us up and repels us. It repels us from one another. And where are we going? Where are we going right now? We're going in a place where we're all either going to be working in the service economy, where we're not guaranteed benefits, we're not guaranteed a minimum wage because we're running orders, or we're going to be working from a distance and not talking to our fellow workers. We have to talk to one another, and we have to form something that starts to break this thing. Chile, right now, what has just happened in Chile is they rejected neoliberalism. They went and they formed a populist movement, and they've said, we're done with this shit. We're done with it. And Chile is where this whole thing started. And I have to tell you that they suffered under this for a long, long time. And what's happening right now, and this is true, and this isn't bullshit, neoliberalism is faltering because it doesn't have an ideology. It doesn't have a movement to it. It's meaningless. It's hollow. It's like eating cotton candy. That's all it is. There's nothing to it. It's faltering. So that means that something has to take its place. That either means that we attack it and we take it down and we find something that's real. And I got to tell you this, and this is honest to God truth. This isn't some sort of like hidden Marxist thing. It's not some sort of hidden Leninist thing. I think Marx had good points in terms of how he criticized capitalism. I think Lenin had good points in how he criticized capitalism. That doesn't mean that the answer is a dictatorship of the proletariat. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about maybe even something new, something that's not even defined yet. And we need to find it because neoliberalism makes us unable to imagine anything else. It makes us feel completely powerless, like we could never possibly reverse the course of it. And exactly, somebody just said it in the chat. Neoliberalism not only relies on authoritarianism, when it's in trouble, when it starts to be attacked, when it starts to be under duress, it turns to fascism. Because fascism is the way that capital protects itself. When the people don't want to go to work anymore because they're not being paid enough, because they're being abused. When all of a sudden democracy rears its ugly head and there's a possibility that the people might take back power, these people will turn to authoritarians. They will turn to fascist and neo-fascist. That's the area that we're in right now. We're in an area in which capital is turning more and more to authoritarianism and fascism. This is why the Republican Party is what it is. This is why Trump and MAGA has the power and the influence that it does, is because things are changing, or there's an opportunity for things to change. We're going to go through some dark days. We're going to have some fights. I think we're going to win them. I truly, honestly do. That's my challenge for 2022. Get in the fight. Scrape up your knuckles. Bleed a little bit for this thing. And I know some of you are. I know some of you are already in the fight, but we gotta make an attempt at this thing because it's a meat grinder. It really truly is. And unless we make something new, unless we figure out some sort of an alternative, it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be really, really rough. But I think we can do it. So for those of you, this is your first Bourbon Talk, whether you're live or whether you're listening to it or whatever, I believe we can make a difference. And I'm going to be working harder to get to that difference because that's what I believe. I've looked at the history. I've looked at how this thing works. I feel like I understand it really, really well at this point. And history tells me that this thing is going to get better. It's going to get hard, but I think it's going to get better. It's not all doom and gloom. There is hope. You do have power. You are not powerless and you are not alone. Find something. Just email somebody and say, I have a couple of minutes here and there. And if you can't do that, just learn. Just spend a little bit of time here and there learning. Obviously, you're here listening to this, listening to me, or reading stuff. Like, keep doing that. Tell people. When you have conversations with your family, with your friends, with the people around you and your coworkers, have real substantive conversations about what's going on. All right, so we got questions tonight. But there's a lot. There's a lot to get to, and we're going to keep doing this. I'm ready to get the book done. I'm ready to get the book out in the world. I'm ready to do these and, just keep this momentum going. But we got to do something. And that's one of my resolutions, and I hope it's one of yours. Let's get in the fight. Let's make a difference. Because that's the only way it happens, is you start feeling it. It's when you start feeling it. Jeff, absolutely, there are historical precedents. One of the best is in England, whenever you had Oswald Mosley, who was starting the British Union of Fascists. And my God, did he have support from wealthy, like powerful people. I mean, even people like Winston Churchill were very, very enamored with fascism. But Oswald Mosley and all of his thugs started marching around London, and the neighborhoods just said, no, you're not doing it. You're not pulling this shit here. We're going to fight this shit. And the moment that people stood up and said, no, this is done, we're not going to allow fascism to grow here, it killed them. You have to fight against this stuff. Have to. All right. We got good questions. First off, actually, one more drink. Cheers. Londo says, what action should we as Democrats be taking to address the developing right-wing threat to democracy? First, and again, we've got some first-time Bourbon Talk people. I'm not technically a Democrat. I'm an independent. I vote for Democrats against Republicans because the Republican Party has become a public front, not just for capitalism, but also for authoritarianism. So what I would say, if you are in the Democratic Party, if you want to make a difference, you need to stop playing this game of, well, you know what, this person doesn't really stand for what I believe, but I think they can win an election. I think, that those people, they're not really the leftist or the liberal or the progressive that I want, but I think they could win. Because all you're actually doing at that point is you're playing a game. That's Chuck Tottery is what that is. It's like, oh, I think that's a winning move. Yes, it is fascism, but, whatever. It's a winning move. And what you're actually doing when you do that is you're limiting the progress that you can possibly have. You're actually starting to work against yourself. Like, so for instance, right now with the Joe Manchin thing, the Democratic Party, whenever they were talking about budgets and relief packages and all of that, they fought amongst themselves and they lowered what they wanted until it was virtually nothing. And then they couldn't even get to that. Start high, ask for the world, go for your actual principles. Instead of sitting around and pretending, what is another voter beside myself going to want, which is what Democrats do all the time. Instead of worrying what someone else is going to vote for what you want to vote for. We have to stop that shit. Vote for who you want to vote for. Vote for who you think could make a difference. Stop pandering to other voters. The Democratic Party is always chasing a completely made-up voter, the centrist voter that doesn't exist anymore. The only thing that the Democratic Party can do to gain support is start to go ahead and call for what they want. If you start to do that, all of a sudden you can change things. There's a reason why the Republican Party now straddles the left and the right. Now, they don't mean what they say in order to get the votes of working class people, right? By saying, we're going to get your jobs back and all that. They don't mean that. They're engaging in racism and xenophobia and all of those really terrible ideas. And what you have to do is you have to start talking about how to grow the party and the influence, as opposed to saying, well, we're a very narrow group here. We have to figure out within this narrow group. Reject that. It's horseshit. So what I would say to Democrats, start voting for the people that you want to vote for and stop worrying about how it's going to appear to others. And maybe you'll lose some elections. You probably will. But guess what? You'll be able to sleep at night. And eventually you're going to start actually meaning what you have to say. The Democratic Party cannot very, very easily tell people what they stand for. They can tell you that they stand in opposition of the disgusting, patriarchal, racist, white supremacist nature of the Republican Party, but they can't tell you what they're going to do. Like, the neoliberal system is hard, so you have to be a pragmatist, and you have to work within it, and so we really can't do free education, and we really can't do free healthcare, but, we'll do it with a smile, and we'll be kinder. That's the Democratic message in a nutshell, and that doesn't work. The culture war has completely undercut that and hamstrung that idea. You have to spend some time actually standing for something. Stop worrying about the phantom independent voter. They don't exist. They hate your party. They hate the Democratic Party right now because culturally they are in opposition. The Democratic Party has become the party of the professional managerial class, people who have gone to college. That doesn't mean you're doing great. You're being squeezed by the system, but it has become a cultural opposition. So the Democratic Party has been overtaken by special interest, by corporate interest in the professional managerial class. People don't want to work with their bosses on a political movement. They don't want to work with the people who sign their paychecks or talk to them about their HR problems. Start talking about what's wrong with the system. Start talking about inequality. Start talking about neoliberalism as the problem. Stop worrying about that independent voter who doesn't exist. Start voting for people that you care about. Start voting for things that you care about. Stop gamifying it. Chuck Tottery. I'm very happy with that. I'm going to coin that. If other people use it, I called it first, January 2nd, 2022. I've already gone through my first glass. This is good already. I'm enjoying this. I hope y'all are too. I miss doing this when I don't do it. Y'all doing okay? This doing all right for you? 2022, off with a bang. All right, Scott says, Scott says, what are effective actions that ordinary people in red states can help? Cheers. People in red states can take to help secure voting rights, keep the House and Senate, and protect the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Okay, so let's go through this because there's a lot there. First of all, the people who are doing the hard work in the red states, here is to you. Cheers. I will say, I live in Georgia, which of course is actually a blue state, except for the fact that, Brian Kemp stole the gubernatorial election from Stacey Abrams. In this case, yes, that's exactly right. Trump's neoliberalism was disguised as populism. That's all that it is. That's all that it was. So what Trump actually revealed to us is a lot of what would actually work if the Democrats or the left went ahead and embraced it and took away all of this white supremacy, all of the fascism, all of that stuff. But we'll get into that later. Okay, what can we do in red states? We can organize, obviously. That's one thing that we can do. But, that's not everything. Like in the case of Georgia, right? The Democratic Party and Joe Biden and all of these people need to take the voting rights thing seriously. I can put pressure on them. I can call, I can send postcards, I can tell my representative to, get involved in the fight. My senators, I can tell them to get involved in the fight. I can do that, and I should. That's not the end of it, though. I have to be active. I have to talk to people. On top of that, I have to go ahead and tell those people, if they're Democrat, hey, get your head out of your ass and stop pretending like everything's fine and you can just shake hands and go to cocktail parties, because that's not where we're at. This right now is a generational moment. We are either going to have democracy or we're not. Those are the stakes. I don't know what else to tell you. If you can't get around that idea, you are too comfortable. That's the problem. Right? So I can put pressure onto that. I can also tell people, hey, if you're not going to be serious about this thing, I'm not voting for you. Period. The Democratic Party has your vote. Because what are you going to do? You're going to vote for a Republican? You're going to go ahead and allow these people to do it? No. The only lever that we have at this point in the way that all this stuff works are primaries. That's it. And if you can't get it with the program, if you can't treat this stuff seriously, I don't care if you're Chuck Schumer, you're going to get primaried because you're not up to the task. That's the only thing that you can do if you are living in one of these states and you want to go through the official parties. Other than that, it's organization, and it needs to be It needs to be some sort of a grassroots movement, whether or not that's a political movement, whether or not that's a nonprofit, whether or not that's some sort of a mutual care group, something along those lines. You have to build up the organization. That's what you can do, and stop expecting and accepting less. You have to get in the fight. You have to make it better. Chris C. Regarding neoliberalism infecting our lives, what are your thoughts regarding the sudden surge of trust in the economy, just go to work stories and take what we're seeing lately, especially regarding education, where I've seen many stories on micro schools as an alternative for teacher burnout? I spent all day today reading about neoliberalism's attack on public education. They love this stuff. They love that the pandemic did this. It went ahead and showed that you can start doing things on Zoom, and you can start having teachers teach more students because they're doing distance learning. And by the way, one of the things that neoliberals love is they love a crisis. They love showing that, like, man, you can work longer hours for the exact same amount of money with more responsibilities. Fantastic. Thank you. Here's more responsibility. Don't worry about getting paid more. Don't worry about being respected more. All of a sudden, two positions become one. Bonus, right? They love this situation. They love being able to destroy public education in any way, shape, or form. The reason that you are reading stories about things being fine and we all need to chip in and help the economy by going to work and not have a problem. By the way, here's the fun part in that. They're saying that because they want you to be put in harm's way. You are an essential worker. All of a sudden, if you didn't show up to work because you have COVID or Omicron, that would hurt the economy. And we can't possibly hurt the economy, because what's more important than the economy? Not your life. Oh my God. Can you imagine if you had basic human dignity and your life meant more than the economy and a couple of cents of profit? Can you imagine what could possibly happen there? The problem here is that it's not just politicians. It's not just economists. It's people who don't even realize that they're neoliberals. It's managers. It's people within the economy. It's the bourgeoisie. It's people who have something to lose. You have a lot of people, and this is the thing, to go ahead and bring this into focus. Neoliberalism is not a Democratic or a Republican thing. It's not a blue or a red thing. It crosses all spectrums. They don't even believe in nations. All right. We're sitting here talking about the United States of America. They're talking about multinational corporations. They're at a different level. They're not worried about any of those sort of different things, right? When we're talking about Democrat versus Republicans, on one side, we're talking about a party that will not get things done and is riddled through with neoliberals. And on the other hand, we're talking about an authoritarian fascist movement. Those are the choices that we have right now. When all of a sudden we start talking about the economy, you have to realize that what you read, New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, all of these different places, they are essentially neoliberal places, right? They do believe that the economy is one of the most important things. On top of that, most of them are wealthy people. Most of them come from money. Most of them inherited a shit ton of money. Most of them come from some of the most powerful families in the world. I thought it was really interesting on New Year's Eve that CNN kept making a joke about the fact that Anderson Cooper comes from the Vanderbilts. But it's true, when you start peeling back the layers, you start noticing people like Maggie Haberman, they come from legacy journalist families. All of a sudden, they're actually trading on the privilege that they have. They're not worried about this shit. They're not worried about authoritarianism. They're not worried about creeping authoritarianism, because at least it will protect property. It will protect wealth. It will protect their positions of power. To start changing things would mean that the things that they have are in danger. If all of a sudden we were to talk about more equality through, finances and wages and all of that, if all of a sudden we were to start talking about distributing aid to people and making the government work for the people, that all of a sudden, that makes people a little bit uncomfortable when they have money and power to lose. They may not think that they're neoliberals, but they have a personal interest in keeping things the way that they are. And Adam just nailed it. The pandemic has made our problems more visible. We are disposable in the pandemic. because what matters is keeping the economy rolling. And it threatened the economy. That's why we can't have a giant lockdown. That's why we can't have anything even approaching some sort of a mandate or some sort of a blanket idea. I mean, I got to tell you, hearing Joe Biden finally say, oh, this is on the states, or we can't really do anything about this. It's refreshing almost. Hearing from everybody, you know what? Like, there's not a lot that we can do. It brings it up front. It says, you know what? This is actually what's happening. This is actually how power works, how politics work. Our federal government and our political parties have basically been relegated to being, public relations front. They're supposed to give us the appearance of power and control. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is pushing us more towards authoritarianism where they can assert more control. But yeah, that's why all of the stories are about this in the news, because those people have an investment in the economy rolling along. They don't want it to be interrupted. They don't want something to happen. The worst possible thing that could happen would be some sort of a strike or some sort of a collective action. This is why they don't talk about those things. They're funded by corporations and incredibly wealthy people. It's not in their interest to promote actual democracy. They may not know that. They may even believe that they're part of a democratic movement. Small d, by the way. They might even believe that that is their actual principle. But in a lot of ways, they don't want that. They don't want to endanger their own personal wealth and their own personal power. Sebastian has a list of 4 questions. So I'm going to go through them and then I'll go through them individually. Number 1. So how has neoliberalism been successfully fought so far? Okay. So again, in Chile, it was about a populist movement. It was somebody saying, you know what, we have to reject this thing. This is not popular. And the main objective that we need is to say, hey, this is the problem. Let's define it and let's go against it. So we have seen that fought against, and we have seen groundswell movements that start to make changes. That's the only way we're going to do this, is from the bottom up and saying we're not going to go along with this anymore. 2. How is the fascist political front for capital in the GOP fought now and in the past? Well, first things first, you got to call them what they are. I have been relieved to see more and more people in the media start to come around to what I've been screaming about for 5, 6. This is year 6. This is year 6. Wow. That's a moment. I had not realized I've been at this for 6 damn years. Woo. All right. 6 years of my life. I gotta tell you, a lot more gray in my beard and my hair. I'll tell you that. Wow. Some of us have been screaming about this for years. Some of us have been telling you for a very long time where this thing was happening, and they called us wild-eyed, paranoid radicals, reactionaries. Because everything's fine. Why can't you just chill out and not worried about things? Everything's going to be fine. I mean, Trump wasn't that big of a deal, and democracy's not really in trouble. I mean, there's some issues, but we're not. We're not reactionaries. We're not being paranoid. We're not being wild-eyed, absurdist. It's true. There's a real, actual problem. The way that you fight it is that you call it what it is. You have to start calling it what it is. You have to say, hey, you are engaged in neo-fascistic authoritarianism. That's your entire thing. That's the entire point of the Republican Party. They don't have an actual ideology beyond white supremacy and patriarchal and evangelical control. That's it. That's all they've got. And deregulation and giving tax cuts to the wealthy. They're not actually helping anybody. So first things first, you have to call them what they are. The second thing is you have to call them out for the contradictions, because they are inconsistent, because they claim to be on the left with the workers and the working class and the poor, and also the far right, because they claim that there's plenty of room of contradictions, because they don't mean anything that they're saying. Donald Trump was the Rosetta Stone of this. He didn't believe anything. He only believes in personal enrichment, and he has an intuition towards fascism. That's who he is. That's who Donald Trump is. You have to start calling out the contradictions and the hypocrisies. But you also have to treat them like an authoritarian, neo-fascistic death cult, because that's what they are. You have to stop messing around with this thing and tiptoeing around it and calling it what it actually is. 3, why was the military budget increased even though there was no need? And from what I understood, the military even said that they didn't need more money. Because the only way to keep the economy going is by investing in something. Here is a secret about capitalism. What we discovered after the Great Depression was that the only way to keep an economy going was for the government to take public wealth and put it somewhere. After the Great Depression, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, I'm going to take the extra money. I'm going to take the capital that the government has. And what's it going to do? We're going to put it towards public works. We're going to put it towards the poor. We're going to put it towards things that the government will fund in order to make people's lives better, right? Well, that was true that it was absolutely needed to keep the economy going. But when the Cold War began, Republicans and the right and Dixiecrats and some of these more libertarian elements, they started saying, you know what? Yeah, we have to invest money somewhere, but let's take it away from the poor and the working class and all these human projects, and let's put it into military buildup against the Soviet Union. So actually, the mobilization against Russia was actually more about jobs. It was actually more about keeping the economy rolling and giving money to a new group of people as opposed to the working class and the poor. It was a jobs program, only it was for the military-industrial complex. They put the money elsewhere, and they used the Cold War as a front. And by the way, here's to 30 years of post-Cold War America continuing to be on war footing because we have no other plan besides continually investing in war. Cheers. Fuck those people. So gross. And then finally, number 4, why do Democrats have the habit of ignoring issues that they campaigned on and promised to deal with, but then do nothing? Because it's a whole lot better than saying we're going to go in and we're going to keep everything going as usual because we're neoliberals. That's no way to win elections. So as a result, you have a lot of arguments between Democrats and Republicans that don't have a whole lot to do with substance. And they'll say, you know what, we'll make things a little marginally better, but, you know, we're not going to make things like terribly different. I mean, my God, can you imagine if we gave power back to the people? I mean, what if you weren't afraid to leave your job? What if you had healthcare that wasn't tied to your job? Right? You might leave your job and your job might have to start paying people more and treating them better. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if people just left their jobs and did what they wanted to do? Oh my God. We probably should have homeless people out there making sure that they see them and that they're afraid to become them. That would be terrible. Robert says Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. You know what's fascinating about that is that Eisenhower helped create it. He was one of the architects of the military-industrial complex. And then at the end of his term, he's like, oh, God, that's pretty bad. Can't believe I helped create that. That was pretty bad. Sorry. Ugh. Ugh. America wants my predictions on a few things, and I'll give them to you very, very quick. My predictions on the pandemic. I think that we are on the precipice of this becoming just a part of our lives. I think that the economy demands it. The economy demands that we treat this like a cold or the flu. Probably by spring, we'll probably end up, we'll get it, we'll all get it, and it'll just become part and parcel of the whole thing. I think that's where this thing is going. Of course, I could be wrong because we refuse to vaccinate people around the world, and there's always the possibility of some other variant popping up and coming after us. So I don't know, but my guess is we're going to be forced to just start treating this like a part of our lives. I think that's where the pandemic is going. Indictments. I've said this. I've said this since, I don't know, 2017, 2018, 2019. I've been saying this a long time. I will believe that Donald Trump will be indicted when it happens. And I didn't make me popular with people. And there were people out there who were like, oh my God, Joe Biden's elected. Donald Trump is going to be indicted on January 21st. Of course he's not. He's a powerful, wealthy, white man. And on top of that, he was a president. Presidents do not want to go after former presidents, because the moment they go after former presidents, all of a sudden it means somebody can go after them for war crimes. Because to be president of the United States of America is basically to commit war crimes. There's no way around that with the way that it's currently constituted. Indictments, I don't know. People tell me it's going to happen. I'll believe it when I see it. That's the unfortunate truth there. What do I think is going to come from the January 6th Commission? I think they're going to continue to butt heads with people like Meadows and Bannon. I have no idea where it's going. I said this on the podcast a while back. I thought they weren't going to do anything. I thought that it was basically going to be a show. I have appreciated that they've pushed back on these people, and by pushing back, that there have been moments where they have found discovery. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with January 6th. The Bannon thing, I think, is going to be a landmark moment. I think one way or another, what we see from the Bannon situation, I think is going to tell us a lot about where this country is going. Midterms. As of right now, if the Democratic Party doesn't figure out a story or a narrative of what's happened and where it's going, they're going to get wiped out. That's the truth, because they have no answer. They can say, give us more seats, but, look what's happened. That's not how midterms work. The majority party usually gets beat up in midterms, and the Democrats particularly get beat up in midterms constantly. I've talked to enough Democrats. I've given them my piece of advice. I've told them over and over and over, every Democrat I know, I've reached out to them and I've said, you have to have an alternate story. You have to have a narrative for what has happened. If you have, and this is what happened with Obama, if you have a Democratic Party that goes out and tries to distance themselves from Joe Biden and tries to run from them and run to the right, they're going to be wiped out on a level unheard of. And God knows what happens there. In terms of legislation, I still don't think Build Back Better is going to get passed. I think I think Manchin is there specifically to keep stuff like that from being passed. And there are other Democrats who don't want it passed as well. So right now, I would say that stuff is dead in the water, which is what I've thought from the beginning. I talked to the progressives. They thought the moment that infrastructure got decoupled from Build Back Better, that it was over. And that's that. Daniel showed up. I'm drinking Old Williamsburg. I've never had this before. I bought it over the holiday break. It's pretty good. Not bad. All right. Jennifer Joyce. Given the inefficiency, inefficacy. Ooh, that's a big word. That's an SAT word. Inefficacy of the federal government and the fact that states like California have economies that can thrive on their own. What are your thoughts on disbanding the United States into smaller countries? Is it feasible as a solution? Not right now. And I do think that I think right now, if I had to put money on it, that's a possibility. Yeah, I think in the future, you could definitely see a geographical sort of realignment, particularly along ideological lines. I could see that as a possibility. I could, especially if things continue to go the way that they are. But I do have to tell you that the moment that we start dividing into new confederations of states, anything that would lead to that, particularly in this situation in which, the culture war is driving it, in which, in which this hatred and lack of trust is happening, that's going to lead to violence. There's no easy separation here. That leads to violence. And people dying, and possibly large scale violence. And it could be bad. It could be bad, but I'm not ruling that out as a possibility of that happening. All right, we're coming up on an hour, but we'll get one more in real fast. Erica says, you have talked about the government bringing change through creating jobs to those previously employed by coal. But when a new industry is brought in by corporations, what do you imagine the impact might be? The problem here, and Erica sent this along with an article about corporations opening up solar. So this is one of those situations now where big energy, big oil, all of the people who've caused this problem for so long, they come to a point where they realize that peak oil has passed, or the climate change is real, which they know climate change is real. They've known it since the 1970s. There's a time at which they say, you know what, we've squeezed and bled as much out of this thing as we possibly can. The future is in the alternative. When you start seeing all these people move towards that, one, that can be hopeful, but that also should tell you, oh my God, I think there's blood in the water. That's the frightening thing, is all of these people, they've been looking at it for decades, saying, when is it in our best interest to move away from this dying, destructive energy and towards something new? They've had this on a whiteboard or a chalkboard or whatever in the hell, whenever they decided it was around. They've been ready for this. This is hopeful, but also frightening. All right, we're to an hour, so we're going to take a drink. It is 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Appreciate all of you. Happy New Year's. All right, I got 2 questions together here. Rich, do you think Twitter suspending Marjorie Taylor Greene actually means anything, or is it performative? Will it make a difference considering she has other platforms? And Laura says, what are your thoughts on Twitter banning Marjorie Taylor Greene? First and foremost, they both win. That's the problem here, is that Twitter has a public relations moment where people cheer for them and they say, you know what, you took away the speech of someone that I don't like. And of course, she then has the victory of saying, look, I've been persecuted, which is the only thing that she cares about. The post-Trump Republican generation only cares about saying that they are the victims. They are celebrities. They are reality TV stars. They don't have anything even approaching an actual ideology. They are shameless and craven. In this case, that's what she wants. These people, when they get banned or thrown out of places or whatever happens, it's a victory for them. So it's for her, it's going to be a victory. She's going to obviously go into Gitter or GABA or whatever in the hell they're using nowadays. And that's going to be a victory for them because that's what they want to show, that they are the true victims, even though they are white and wealthy and affluential. The entire point of this project of working within the Republican Party and working with either the working class, or you've got, of course, you know, the white paranoid generations, or you also have small business owners who feel like they should have more money. And then you have the wealthy who, of course, own the world. What the Republican Party represents is the manifestation of the anger that somebody has kept you back. Like Donald Trump Jr., of course, standing there on January 6th and using his time and his platform and his power to say, I don't get enough likes and retweets on Twitter or Instagram. That speaks directly to people who say, you know what, my life should be better, but someone's holding me back. There's obviously a shadow ban on me. There's obviously someone who has decided to keep me from what I deserve. And so as a result, the Republican Party says, you know what, I'll tell you who did this. It's big tech, it's wealthy, it's professional managerial class, it's the Democrats, it's people of color. And so when they say that, what they're actually doing is driving deep down into the feeling that those people's lives should be better. And so as a result, whenever they get, you know, banned or thrown off of some place or taken off committees or whatever, it's victimhood. And they celebrate that. It's trolling is what it is. It's trolling and grifting off of personal aggrievement. That's all that this new generation actually cares about. You know, there's some of them that have an ideological bent. There's some of them that actually care about things in terms of fascism, in terms of authoritarianism, and those people are starting to sort themselves out. But the way that they appeal to these people is through personal agreement. Jenica says, at least since Bush v. Gore, which, by the way, people want to pretend like Bush v. Gore didn't happen. Like this country wouldn't watch a presidential candidate steal an election. Like that couldn't possibly ever happen. Oh my God, Jared Yates Sexton, you say that a coup is possible? You say that a presidency can be stolen and power can be stolen in the United States of America? Oh my God, what a reactionary. Nobody remembers 2000. They stole the presidency and everything kept going. There was no general strike. People went back to work the next day. They just kept going and they stole the presidency. It was the most obvious thing in the world. People just kept going. Nobody did anything. There wasn't even the beginning of a general strike. There wasn't even the beginning of popular action. It's incredible. Incredible. At least since Bush v. Gore, media has acted as a giant megaphone for the GOP, portraying GOP operatives' messaging as widely held views. I worry this has distorted politics, amplifying anti-mask, anti-vax, anti-expert, anti-education agendas. Are there more of us than them? Yes, there are. The problem in this case, and there's a couple of different things happening here, is that our media is so terrified of being called biased. And this actually is one of these things that we don't like talking about. All right. So one of the reasons that fake news, that, of course, what Donald Trump said all the time, one of the reasons that worked is because he pointed out something that was very, very true, which is the news media does have a bias. Nobody is unbiased. Everybody has a way of viewing the world. That's one of the great truths of being a human. You do have an ideology. You do have ideas. You do take information and filter it through. The media is not a priest class. They're not kept in a basement away from anything, just, and then given a thing and said, report this unbiasedly. Writing is biased. Thoughts are biased. The way that we communicate is biased. The New York Times does have a bias. It just so happens that bias is towards capitalism and power continuing in the same way, shape, and form that it is. When Donald Trump said that, he actually pointed to something very, very true, which is that our media is biased. But they hate it. They hate that they are biased, and they teach in their schools, they're like, you must be unbiased. You can never inject yourself into an article. That's bullshit. Journalism has always been about bias. The original newspapers and reporters were completely biased. They were party organs. They were propaganda rags. They have an agenda. They have something that they're saying. This is something very, very new that they made up. This is this new idea that journalists have brought up, the idea that they are unbiased. And in a large part, it's because they brought down the presidency, of course, with Woodward and Bernstein. They were like, there was no ideological bent for this. Yeah, sure. There wasn't at all. The problem is that the media actually is biased. And the Republicans know that they're biased in the same way that the media knows that they're biased. But what they do is they call them biased all the time. And the media is like, oh, you think we're biased? Well, watch this. We're going to bring you on our show. We're going to write an article that praises you. We're going to give you tons of space in this newspaper. Who's biased now? And what do they do? Why do they go ahead and say that? Because they're terrified of being called biased. And so I use this in, I want to say the people are going to rise. It's like in a college basketball game or an NBA game. You yell at the refs for so long that eventually the ref says, you know what? I'm going to prove to you that I'm not biased against you. I'm going to give you a call. I'm going to give a call in your direction. Oh, who's biased now? That's what our media is. They actually are biased. They actually are, for the most part. They do lean a little bit left. They're not, maybe some of them are liberals. They're not progressive. They're not leftist. Most of them do believe in free market capitalism and end up somewhere on a normal sort of a spectrum or the Overton window. But they hate being called biased. But there are way, way more of us than there are of them. They give these people so much space and so much time. Every diner in Iowa has been interviewed 16, 17 times over. The Republican Party is historically unpopular. Historically unpopular. John Jam, any hope for the voting rights bill? I could see that. I could see that being one of the actual achievements of Biden's presidency. I could see that being something that he rallies people towards. The problem here is that he would need to go out on a limb. The Democratic Party needs to go out on a limb and say, you know what, there's an actual problem and we're going to solve it. If I was going to flip a coin on this thing, I would say that they don't end up passing a voting rights bill. But I would love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. That needs to happen. Absolutely. The things I see. Who's the next Speaker of the House? And when the GOP takes the House back? Basically, this question, of course, is asking whether or not Donald Trump, if the Republicans win the House, whether or not Donald Trump will become the Speaker of the House. Because the Speaker of the House does not have to be a member of the House. There's been a lot of people who have talked about bringing Donald Trump in as Speaker of the House. A lot of people have then talked about, of course, impeaching Biden and Harris and then bringing Trump up through the order of succession. I don't think that will happen. First and foremost, because I don't think Donald Trump wants the job. I don't think he wants to actually do something. He wants to call himself Mr. President, but he doesn't want to actually do the work. But that being said, I mean, listen, all bets are off. The Republican Party is shithouse crazy. They might do this thing. They might gain some momentum behind it and actually try it out. So here's the thing. I wouldn't put money down on it either way. But that being said, I don't think he wants to do the job. Math whiz. Will China try to invade Taiwan this year? Will Russia go into the Ukraine? I do not think Russia will go into the Ukraine. I don't think that will happen. Could be wrong. It feels like a lot of gesturing or puffing up of the chest. I think Russia has a lot of other long-term ideas, but I will say that, yes, that's right, Ukraine, not the Ukraine. I will say that we are in a situation where we're sort of bristling for something major. We are bristling for some sort of a major showdown. We are way overdue for some sort of a major conflict. If you were to tell me that happens in the next few years, I wouldn't be shocked. And I think Taiwan or Ukraine would probably play into either one of those things, maybe concurrently. Yeah, U.S. being fearful of China doing imperialism is something. But I think in a lot of ways that everybody involved in all of these things understand that there's a moment of friction and that they're not necessarily going to push over in the other direction. I'm also not fond of a new Cold War, which I think would actually hurt the rest of us. And it might go ahead and solve the contradictions and inadequacies of neoliberalism. It's a really easy way to get around those things, leading to militarism and violence, jingoism, militarism, all the things that neoliberalism really, really needs to inject meaning into this situation. All right, I have three more. Tito says, will anyone in the GOP be held accountable for what occurred on January 6th? Do I think Garland is inept? I don't think Garland is inept. I just think that he's not interested in doing this. I think that, if the Biden administration and the people around it, including Garland, could just move forward and pretend like this shit didn't happen, I think they'd be more than happy to do it. I think holding people accountable takes political capital. It takes courage. It takes a chance. And this is one of those really awful points, is that I think a lot of these people don't have the courage to do this thing. I think that they don't have the courage to take on, the real actual situation. And that's disgraceful. Really, really awful. But no, I don't think he's up to it. If I had to guess, I would say probably one person gets prosecuted. They really like one person, right? That's what ended up happening after the 2008 crash. One person gets held accountable and say, hey, you can't say we didn't do anything. I mean, look, this happened. All right, two more. Chris C. With very little, if any, consequences delivered for January 6th, it's clear that the right will continue to embrace fascism and anti-democratic tendencies. Amen. How do you think they will try to sell anti-democracy to the concerned middle-class woman in Ohio? It's easy. They've already started to do that with CRT. They've already said, hey, they're going after your kids. And the implicit stuff with CRT and the things going on in schools has to do with a lot of the things that they've always done, which is, and we've talked about this on the Muckrake podcast before. When you send your kids to school, like, you kind of have this insecurity about what they're going to learn there. Who are the people who are teaching my kids? I don't want my kids coming back from school hating me, hating our way of life. That is the conservative nature. And so basically what they're saying is when they go to school, they're being taught to hate you. They're being preyed upon by critical race theorists. They're being preyed upon by transgender people. They're coming for your kids. And that's the way that you go ahead and you make inroads with the concerned middle-class woman in Ohio. And I think what Chris C. is bringing up here, to bring everybody up to speed, there is the idea that everybody is going after, and this was the original, independent middle voter, what both of the parties were going after, which is a white woman, I believe it was Dayton, Ohio, right? Who, is for civil rights, but she's made a little bit uncomfortable by it. So basically, you're going after racist white Americans in middle America. In this case, the Republican Party has already made inroads by using education as the lever, as the inroad here, which says, oh, Democrats and the left want to talk about inequality, they want to talk about race, they want to talk about transgenderism, they want to bring all of this stuff in. And Jamil just nailed it. In the past, it was evolution. In the past, it was gay rights. It was all of those things. And the problem here is that the issue is that you have to talk about these things, but you have to figure out how to do it so it brings along some of these other people, so that they understand that all of these people, all of the people who are saying CRT, transgenderism, all of that, they're keeping you from making more money. They're keeping you from living better lives. They're using your prejudices against you to keep you having lower wages and worse lives and shorter lives and more misery and no health care and no infrastructure. They are keeping you from having better lives by using your prejudices. That's the way you have to figure out to message this thing. They have used your prejudices against you. Come on out here. We'll figure it out. Last question. Jeff says, has anyone seen chatter online about any planned anniversary insurrection on January 6th or even later this year? What are the extremists planning these days? I haven't seen anything in terms of something happening on January 6th. I wouldn't be shocked if there's like a group that goes ahead and tries to make something the anniversary. But I do not think that there's going to be some sort of a large scale thing. I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong. I mean, the ground is fertile for that. I think at this point for 2022, what we're going to see starting now is a ratcheting up of the tension and the temperature going into the midterms. I think the midterms are going to be really ugly. I think it's going to be a really gross political year. And again, like I said earlier, I do think we're going to win, not necessarily the midterms, but I think this overall battle, there's going to be some rough spots. There's going to be some rough shit coming. And I do think that 2022 in terms of a political year is going to be rough. And while that happens, as that tension is ratcheted up, as the anger is ratcheted up, as the fear is ratcheted up, that's when we're going to see some of these groups start to coalesce, gain more members, gain more influence. I don't think necessarily we're going to see something happen on January 6th to commemorate it unless it is one little group. I don't think it's going to be the larger thing. That was really fun Fun's not the word, but every time that I don't do this thing, I miss it terribly, and then I get back, and I'm so appreciative of all of you. I can't tell you the kindness and support, what it means to me. These are hard times, but I will say that, again, I think we're going to win this thing. I think we're going to have a better future. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of blood, a lot of sweat, a lot of tears. Keep faith. 2022, get into it. Get into it. Figure out something you care about. Figure out something that you can get involved with and get involved with it. We're going to do this thing. We're going to do this thing. I've got the book due on the 24th, which means that the next few weeks are going to be focused. I got to get this thing done. And, it's not actually wood paneling. Oh my Lord. No, this isn't actual wood paneling. Oh no, this is like some stuff that's almost impossible to drill through. You have no idea how hard it is to drill through this stuff. We'll be back. I might do one in a couple of weeks, or I might just go ahead and come back next month, depending upon the time. We'll see where I'm at with the book here in a couple of weeks. Wish me luck with that. We are going to have the Muckrake podcast that comes back on Tuesday. You can go over to patreon.com/Muckrake podcast for an additional episode on Fridays. I'm very proud of the Weekender that we do on Fridays. That's patreon.com/Muckrake podcast. If you want my writing right now, you can go to jaredyatessexton.substack.com. Dispatches from a collapsing state. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for coming out, hanging out. Tell people. If you have family, friends who might be receptive for this, people who know that something is going on, that something is weird, that there's a problem that needs addressed, hopefully these bourbon talks and the writing will make a difference, because we have to talk about it. So if you have somebody around, the business plot, that's in the new book. I talk about the business plot in the new book. If you know a friend, a relative, a neighbor, somebody who'd be receptive to this stuff, pass it on. Let's go ahead and build a movement. Let's do this thing. Y'all are the best. Cheers to defeating not just neoliberalism, but authoritarianism and neo-fascism. We're going to do it. Also to Betty White. Absolutely. What a beautiful soul. Cheers. All right, everyone. Have a good Sunday. Have a good 2022.